Welcome to the Creative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I'm super happy you're here. On the show, I focus on creative thinking, problem solving, and living. Most often, I'll discuss how to ignite inspiration, meet challenges, and achieve goals through creative thinking. Sometimes I'll have guests who give their perspective. Usually, it's people who are already living their best and most creative lives. Okay, let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to the Creative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I'm glad that you're here. Today I want to talk about something that happened just yesterday, and it's making me go, and that is this idea that I've been discussing on the podcast and also writing a lot about visionaries and implementers. So, for example, a visionary is someone he's the idea, or they're the idea person. Steve Jobs would have been a great example of a visionary. And then there's the implementer, someone who takes the visionary's grand ideas and builds on them. Actually, is probably the person who, implements them, right? Gets them to actually happen. To keep going with the Apple idea, Tim Cook makes an excellent implementer. I don't know that he's had a whole bunch of radical ideas, but he definitely knows how to take on the seed of what someone else has planted and help an acorn grow into a mighty oak. And this was brought home to me with something that happened between my husband and me yesterday. So Rich is an artist, and he's an incredible artist. And just the other night, he was doodling, and he started with a doodle, and out of the doodle came this lovely drawing. And if you look at the show notes, you'll see the drawing. And, he just did it, I think, pretty quickly, and he turned it into a black and white thing of this woman walking out of a cabin. And I looked at it and thought, wow, I love this. And so I asked if I could color it, and not the original. He offered me the original, and I was like, no, give me a copy because I don't want to mess up your original. So I went ahead and took all of my colored pencils, and I colored the drawing. And if I say so myself, it came out pretty well. I mean, it's coloring, right? So it's not the actual creation of the main idea. It's not the visionary portion of it, but I implemented it, and together we made something really lovely. And that's the way I look at it. And it's interesting because Rich's description of it was, hey, collaborative art. And I thought, wow, yeah, that's exactly what it was. Is the whole greater than the sum of its parts? I actually really like it. I like how it came out. But also, when I look at the black and white now, it feels like something is not quite there, right? So to me, this idea of having an idea, of being the visionary, is lovely and amazing, and it gets the ball rolling. But the ball will stop eventually unless it's all downhill. So there needs to be somebody else, or even you, if you're your own implementer, who actually keeps the ball rolling and expanding and growing. So if everything is downhill, then it's easy. But if you are on a level plane or an incline, if it's challenging for you, if it's difficult somehow, sometimes you need to collaborate with others in order to make things happen. So to that end, and another episode that I did just last week about what's the worst that could happen, that is something that is giving me some courage to strike out and, for example, ask people who otherwise I would have been too afraid, frankly, to ask because, who am I to ask them to be on my podcast? But you know what? Why not, right? Why not ask? And so I went, okay, I can't do this by myself. So one of the sort of strategies that I'm using is I'm calling on people I know who are fantastically creative and who think creatively to see if they want to be on the show. And what's interesting, my idea about the podcast has solidified into, or crystallized, I should say, into one thought. And that thought is this. The Creative Mindset Podcast is about how we can use creative thinking to live our best lives and do our best work. That's it. That's what it's about. And so talking about that to somebody I'm asking to be on the show makes everything a lot easier. So one of the things you need to know as a visionary or an implementer, you have to know what your log line is. What's the tagline for this? What is the main idea? What's the specific idea that you want to get across as a visionary or as an implementer? As a visionary, you will probably have the seed. You'll probably be the acorn. As the implementer, if you don't know what that idea is, what that main thrust of it is, then how are you going to know if you're planting the acorn in the right soil, at the right temperature, with the right amount of sunlight, and getting the right amount of water? So when you know that specific idea, it helps you a lot to implement what needs to happen. That is so much a part of this. So in order to be able to do Rich's drawing any kind of justice, I had to really study it for a little while and go, okay, so there's a moon, there's a crescent moon in it, which means it's probably not daytime. Maybe it is, but probably not daytime. So I chose night. That was one of the sort of specifics that I went, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I had to figure out what that meant as far as the background, and its hills and grasslands. And then there's what I thought was a little stream and what Rich had intended to be a path. And it's very interesting that if you look at the drawing as if there's a path that she has decided not to walk on, that gives us a kind of a Robert Frostian feeling, that there were two paths diverged in the woods. I took the one less traveled, and that has made all the difference. So on that level, she's not taking the path that she could have been taking. Well, that's wonderful, except for in my mind, that looked more like a stream than a path. And what's interesting about that is that as the implementer, if I'd had the specific idea in my head, what he knew, what he intended, I would have never made it a river because that wasn't his intent. So as the implementer, as the person who was taking the idea and making it grow, I kind of feel like I took the acorn, and instead of leaving it as an acorn, it became like an elm or a sweet gum or something. But the point is that at that point, it was my thing to do with as I wished. So to me, the stream makes more sense, except for one thing. And this is where this idea of specificity becomes really important. She had a satchel with her, right? So she was leaving the little cabin, and she had a satchel, and she had dropped the satchel or put it down, seemingly on the path, perhaps. Or now, with my version, the satchel's in the water. So, oops, right? So again, if I'd have known, if I had that specific one tagline, one long line that I was going to be working from, that would have made all the difference. But I didn't, so I decided to take artistic license, and now I have to go, okay, there's a story here. Why did the satchel end up in the little stream right behind her? If it's not a path, if it is a stream, what could have caused her to go, that's it, you know what, I'm done? Is it like an Achilles situation, and the little bundle she's carrying is actually a baby, and the satchel is all her stuff that has gotten dropped into the little stream and is about to float away, and she's not going to get it? There's a story there. Is there a story with the satchel being on the path too? Sure. So there's a lot of stuff that could be going on right there. Could she have dropped the satchel intending to just walk on into freedom unencumbered by any possessions? Absolutely. Could she have done the same thing and dropped it in a stream? Completely. But then we come back to that Frostian idea. If she's taking the road less traveled, what does that mean for her as a person who is sort of the mistress of her own life, right? She is in charge of her. And she's made a very specific decision here, either to leave it on the path and walk on without it, or to drop it into the water, which is even worse because it will presumably either get all wet or wash away. But she's made that choice, right? So when we're looking at this, me collaborating with Rich and looking at this artistic collaboration, any number of different paths diverge in the wood, and you as the viewer, you as the art critic, if you will, have to decide for yourself what it means to you. Rich's job as the visionary was to come up with the seed. My job as the implementer was to help it grow. And then your job as the viewer is to decide whether or not to sit under the shade of this one tree. It's a fascinating collaboration, and it all stems from knowing what that first idea is. If I had known this was a path, if I had known from him specifically that this was a path, would it have changed what I did? Probably not. I wasn't the visionary. I was the implementer in this collaborative art project. But it might have, and I might have done things a little differently, and it might not be as interesting a story. It might not be as final. You know what? I'm dropping this. I don't want these encumbrances so much that I'm going to drop them into a stream so that they can float away, and I'll never have to deal with them again. Wow, that's a strong stance, right? That's a very direct, this is what I'm doing. So which is it? Well, for Rich, it was a path, and if he had colored it in, he probably would have done it differently than me. But for me, it was a stream, and that says something to me only after I looked at where the satchel was. Because I had in my mind, I'm always about water, so water was going to have to be a part of this. But I noticed that the satchel was in the water or on the path after I'd already colored it in. So on that level, if I had paid attention to the specificity and the logic of what was being presented to me, I might have done things differently. But at the same time, I can then now leave it up to you as the viewer of this piece of art to decide what it is you see and what it is you feel about what Rich and I created collaboratively. And in fact, I'm going to put the drawing up in 4 different phases of coloring, 1 fully black and white, 1 fully colored, and 2 in between, so you can see how things progress and decide for yourself what that is. And the last thing I want to say is this is all an exercise in me inviting you to decide which one you are, which role you most play. Are you mostly a visionary or mostly an implementer? And do you know the specs of each role as you play it? This is something I'm going to be talking about more and more, because how we think, this idea of thinking creatively to live your best life and do your best work, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. I think we need to figure out what those ideas mean, what those words mean to us, and we need to live accordingly. So I'm going to be talking about this, as I said, a lot more moving forward, but I do hope that you will take a look at the show notes and see the different images and see what you think of them, because they are certainly they're evocative to me anyway, and I hope they will be to you as well. I will probably be talking more about art and creative thinking in this way in the next few episodes, and if the person that I just asked to be on the show agrees, then you will hear him on the show in like 2 or 3 weeks. And I have another exciting interview all set up for tomorrow. He will be on the show a week from Wednesday. The great Paul Liberti is going to be joining me on the show. Paul is the voice of Curious George. He has been on Pokemon for a number of years. He's a Broadway dancer and actor, just all sorts of amazing stuff. And he's also one of the premier voice acting teachers, certainly in the country. And I'm very excited that he's going to be on the show. Our interview will air a week from this Wednesday on, April 29th, I think. So I hope that you will definitely be back for that. And this Wednesday, coming tomorrow, actually, this is tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow's episode is former NASA communications officer for the International Space Station and avowed space geek, Beth Munda, is going to be joining me on the show tomorrow. So I hope that you enjoy. And if you're liking what you're hearing, please consider leaving a review of the show wherever you listen. In the meantime, I hope that you are staying well and staying healthy. And remember that you are loved. And I will be here soon. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg saying, let's get to it. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and please tell your friends about the community we're building here. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright Isolde Trachtenberg 2019. Today's music was from Kevin MacLeod, Laser Groove, and Ave Marimba, brought to you by Creative Commons License 3.0. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, I send you all of my love.